And Banana, he was the first, I suppose, non-executive president of Zimbabwe when Robert Mugabe was prime minister back in the day. That's going back. I wonder why that man is carrying that poster. Very interesting. Mr. Bambeo, we're starting to wrap up this conversation, but I'm interested we got to this point. Robert Mugabe has got access to intelligence. He's got access to people close to him who would have seen what was happening, access to people inside the military. How could he not have seen this day coming?
Well, one thing that we must point out is Mugabe was unwanted by the party. The people that did not actually want Mugabe more than anybody else is the party. But the problem with ZANU-PF was that if you can make any voice that sought to dissent or that sought to discourage the status quo, you could pay with your life or you could pay by getting fired. And with the scarcity of jobs in Zimbabwe, have you got an option? You know, if you are on the gravy train, you eat. So you cannot stand out and say, blah, 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 Mugabe is wrong and all that nonsense. That was dead. That was never heard of under him. But now the people went and were planning very, very long time. This plan was not made. The script that we saw unfolding over the 2 weeks, it would never have been made just after the sacking of Mnangagwa. When Mnangagwa came out of the country, he released a statement. He said, "Behold my people, in a matter of 3 weeks, I will come back and lead you. Let your hearts not be troubled." That is a pregnant statement. So it's a script that was already there on the side, and they knew what they were doing. But because they were together in war, they wanted to give him the decency of appointing a certain guy as a successor and saying, okay, you can take over now and get things rolling. But because Mugabe is a dictator, he's stubborn. He wanted to to find his way, to sneak around and sneak around. And eventually they caught up with him. What Mugabe never wanted to see in his life is this moment of him becoming a former vice president. He had been, since 1980, his primary goal, or even in the war,
President for life.
He was life president, and he has always been doing that.
As Mnangagwa sees these images here, will he have in his mind that ZANU-PF needs to reform?
Remember, this process that you see, there are people that have been working behind the scenes to make sure that it happens, it is happening. And I happen to be one of the people that has been working behind the scenes to make this event a success, this whole process a success. And we have warned those people that to say to them, guys, we do not want to create another Mugabe. And believe you me, we are going to use the same mechanism that we have used now to make sure that we dislodge you. And we do not expect that Mnangagwa will rule us for more than 10 years if we were to win in a free and fair election. He understands that very crystal clear. And Mugabe has actually reached the epitome of failure. And under normal circumstances or even abnormal circumstances, there is the ceiling. Mugabe set the ceiling. Where else can you go than to do the best?
Is there going to be a reordering of the politics in terms of leaders? We've heard Arthur Mtambara earlier on. We've got Tendai Biti, who was former finance minister. What's going to happen to these characters now going forward?
What we would want to see as Zimbabweans, we know our capabilities. We know we've got a serious injection in the form of national unity. We used that injection in 2008 and the country brimmed with success. So that is the same injection that we would anticipate that we use it now so that we can cure and find a soft landing. Once we've got the soft landing and we adjust it to one another, while our people are full in the stomachs, then we can go to an election. We don't want to be rushed into an election that will accuse Mnangagwa of rigging again. Then we go back in the streets, then we start fighting again. Let everything calm down. In a national transitional authority, we find one another, we work together as a nation, and I can promise you that Zimbabwe will be the best country once and forever. So
you're also of the opinion that next year is too early to hold elections?
Remember, Zimbabweans have never cried for elections. They tried to cry for elections, and the elections have never brought any reasonable results. So what Zimbabweans need is an understanding that brings food on the table, an understanding that brings people that are sleeping under the bridges in South Africa back home to come and participate in the nation, an understanding that will bring a currency of our own, an understanding that will bring money out of the ATMs. I do not think that if we go into elections in 10 months' time or whatever the case might be, tomorrow we might have money in our ATM. There is no money. So a national transitional authority brings money into the ATMs, it brings the confidence. And I tell you that if they can announce that within a week or two, investors will be lining up to bring their money into Zimbabwe. And also Zimbabweans will be going back home, knowing that the nation is in the hands of capable people, not a demented old man.
There are some people who loved Mugabe. There are some people who loved the old ZANU-PF. And they're watching these scenes. They have to stay indoors or perhaps not show up. What does a new leader need to do to bring them on board?
Well, he would do what Mugabe did. When Mugabe won elections in 1980, he invited everybody. He invited the white people, he invited the Indians, he invited the blacks, he invited everybody to participate. So that is the same message that we are carrying forward to say, as we have been united behind getting Mugabe out, let's continue with the unity, the spirit of unity that will make sure that we all participate in our nation. This great nation is not a nation of tribes, it's not a nation of name calling, it's not a nation of yet, which Mugabe actually made it to be. You know, Mugabe reduced our nation to a nation of yet. Tribalism, you know, they sang songs such as the Zulu unconquerable, meaning that the Zulu is a special tribe in Zimbabwe. That is a no. We are not going to go into a Zimbabwe that has such kind of things happening.
Dumiso Dabengwa, where is his place now?
Well, we are not greedy because we understand that Zimbabwe is a very big country. With these people that we are going to see in the national the dispensation or transitional authority, they are not really there because they are able to do the job. They are only there to accommodate certain feelings so that we can be seen to be working together as a nation. Because if I can tell you, they are not so good at the end of the day, but we just need them to make sure that we manage a transitional period.
There's going to be an examination of Robert Mugabe's legacy. Will he be buried at Heroes Acre?
Well, according to me, he did his part in the liberation because that place is for people that liberated our country. And in terms of liberation, he did that. From 1980 to 1995, I loved to hear him speak over the television, over the radio. He was my hero. But unfortunately, from there on, he missed his steps and we don't see much of his legacy. But in terms of burying him at the Heroes Acre, let's accord him the status. He deserves it.
So it's going to be difficult for some younger people to remember or recall some of the contribution that he did. He spent 10 years in jail. He gave his life to the struggle, liberating Zimbabwe, but they were born when he was president. And so it's going to be difficult to try and pull that into his legacy.
Yeah, well, it's not very easy at the moment because remember, a child that was born in the year 2000 would be 17 years now, and they have known nothing else other than suffering, and that is acute suffering for that matter. So they have no record of Mugabe's goodness, and those people can never be convinced at any given moment that Mugabe was a good guy. It's only a few that were born and that realized, that saw him do things in a better way, that would say, no, there's a legacy to talk about in the older generation. But be that as it may, our history is incomplete without his name. So we have got to keep it in our history books, and for the best and for the worst, it's all together. It's part of humanity. It's part of life.
Mr. Mambeo, I know you have to leave now, but thank you very, very much indeed for sharing your thoughts and your insights with us this evening on this historic day, the end of 37 years of rule, the only president that Zimbabwe has ever known, Robert Mugabe, resigning today. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, and God bless Zimbabwe.
All right, so Francis, continuing with these images, this remarkable story that continues to unfold in Harare and other parts of the country and the world.
Indeed, on the streets of Harare, the streets of Johannesburg, reaction coming in. We spoke earlier to a human rights lawyer, many people who have been critical of the ZANU-PF party under Robert Mugabe's leadership. And Amnesty International has now released a statement. Let's speak to Lloyd Covea, a researcher with Amnesty International. He joins us via Skype. He's in Johannesburg. We did speak to him a few days ago. And Lloyd, let's just start with your statement in response to his resignation.
Robert Mugabe, we are looking at his legacy. You know, where he started off so well, but then down the line he started missing the point, and we then see that his legacy was then undermined by a spike of human rights violations, which started in the 1980s and continued from 2000 onwards until his resignation today. So the legacy, unfortunately, he undermined it by his own, violations of human rights, disregard for the rule of law, just violating people's fundamental freedoms, And there are so many of them. You can look at freedom of expression, the manner in which it was violated. People were not free to express themselves. This is the reason why you are seeing now people celebrating. Now people will be able to assemble without fear, to associate with any political party of their choice without fear. People will be able to protest, to criticize government policies and government decisions and actions without fear of political reprisals. This is the hope of the new dawn that people are experiencing now. I mean, the Mugabe's legacy is also cluttered with enforced disappearances of people that started in the 1980s. Many people disappeared. Some were tortured. A lot of people were killed. People are still waiting to find out the truth of what happened to their relatives who died. I mean, the most recent one was the death of Itai Dzamara in 2015. There was also impunity, I mean, which was entrenched. Beginning in the 80s, many of the people who committed grave human rights violations have never been held accountable. So all these things, people want to see a new era, a breakaway from that past of violence, a past of impunity, a past where people could not freely express themselves and be able to protest even freely in the streets. We want to see freedom of the media itself. The newspapers should be able to report critically without any fear of closures. More radio stations and community radio stations must be licensed by whoever is going to take over after Mugabe today.
What you're talking about is this hope for incredible change, but we're talking about Emmerson Mnangagwa coming in as the rider on the white horse, but he was integral to the regime when these misdemeanors, atrocities, some would say, in Matabele land were committed. Earlier we spoke to a lawyer who said that ZANU-PF, that all the structures are still there. So can we really be hopeful?
You know, the hope that is there is, you know, when we have a new leadership, one would want to say, look, let us see what happens. Let us give Emmerson Mnangagwa an opportunity to disprove what people are already saying. I mean, look, we cannot ignore the past. We cannot ignore his, human rights record. When he was Minister of State Security in the 1980s, he was the first Minister of State Security. And when he was that minister, that's when many people disappeared, and there were killings of close to 20,000 people in Matabeleland province. We cannot ignore that past. There was also the killings of people in 2008 when Morgan Tsvangirai won in March 2008. And then, many people were killed. There were many people who were intimidated, abducted, and who disappeared. And some women were even raped in March, between March and June 2008. And at that time, Emmerson Mnangagwa was the chief elections officer for President Robert Mugabe. And he was leading in the campaigns. So that record cannot be ignored. But, one would always want to say, look, we are saying never again should this thing ever happen in Zimbabwe. We do not want to see the blood of Zimbabweans being spilled. We do not want to see people that are being enforcibly disappeared because they hold different political opinions. So here's an opportunity for Mnangagwa to open a new chapter for Zimbabwe. Sometimes a villain can become a hero, or a hero can turn into a villain, like what has happened with President Robert Mugabe. So I think the hope that Zimbabweans have is that if Emmerson Mnangagwa takes over, he's going to move from being the villain that is being seen as, to a hero who is going to open a new chapter. And if he doesn't do that, I mean, definitely I think Zimbabweans, as Zimbabweans, I think there's a realization that power belongs to the people, and that hopefully, if the international community continues to assist Zimbabwe, especially in terms of supervision of elections, to ensure that when people vote, their right is protected, their vote is protected, and that there is no one who will be intimidated not to choose a leader of their own choice. So if that happens, then I think the right to vote will be safeguarded. people's freedoms will be safeguarded, and we want a break from the past. I think this is the message to whoever is going to take over, whether it is Mnangagwa or somebody else. But obviously, as it is now, clearly, Emmerson Mnangagwa is going to take over. So that break from the past is what Zimbabweans are looking for. We are saying never again. When you look at what happened in Rwanda and Rwandans said, never again should this ever happen. And I think for me, really, this message of never again can be properly communicated if we know the truth of what happened. There must be that opportunity for people to look at what happened, from 1980s, Bukurahuni, the people who were being killed and abducted during elections. If this happens and people have an open and truthful conversation, then we should be able to realize all these terrible atrocities, the brutality that people were subjected to, the suffering that people were subjected to, and the tears of joy. When you contrast with the tears of joy that we are now seeing, I think this is where we are now.
Lloyd, so you're saying that Zimbabwe should fix its human rights record. Let's give Emmerson Mnangagwa a chance. But you've spoken about rape, torture, death. What does that mean for Robert Mugabe? Should he be prosecuted, or should he be allowed to enter comfortable retirement?
Accountability is always the best way forward. When somebody has committed atrocities, you would expect that there must be accountability. But now you now have to look at the legal framework, whether it exists. Zimbabwe has not ratified the ICC Rome Statute. It is unlikely that the United Nations Security Council will refer Zimbabwe to the ICC, because there is likely to be a veto from China and Russia, who have huge economic interests in Zimbabwe. Then the next destination will be South Africa. Will be South Africa be ready to prosecute Mugabe, since it has domesticated the Rome Statute? It's got the legal framework. It has refused to do so before for crimes that were committed in 2007 and 2008 by senior state security officials. So it is highly unlikely that South Africa will be ready to prosecute Mugabe for those atrocities. So the question is, what is going to happen now, to President Mugabe? So I think for me, it looks like a Truth and Reconciliation Commission process might be the one to take place. And I do not see Mugabe being prosecuted in Zimbabwe. People are just likely to say, look, the man is old, 93 years old. Even if he were to be sent to prison, then what, So I think, but he has to come out openly and say what it is that happened in Zimbabwe. Openly, what was his role, especially around Bukurahuni and all the atrocities that were taking place around the elections. And then people must be compensated. At least there must be an apology from him as a former president of Zimbabwe. There must be that apology, and to say that we now want to start a new dispensation. I think Zimbabweans deserve that. The victims, the relatives of the victims who were killed, deserve to know the truth of what happened to their relatives. So I think for me, that honest conversation needs to take place if there's going to be that reconciliation and forgiveness in the absence of prosecution and accountability on the part of Robert Mugabe and the people that were propping him up.
Lloyd, finally, there are a few possibilities here. A new leader comes in and grips Zimbabwe again, or the army gets an even bigger taste for power and decides to direct the country for years and years to come. Or like you spoke about, the power to the people. The people have a sense that they now have a voice and they can be very influential. I guess that latter one would be the best option for Zimbabwe.
That is the best option indeed. And look, the people ever since have been saying the army must go back to the barracks. I think they've done their part, they've played their part. And now the army must go where they belong, to the barracks. And we do not want a situation whereby the army has any role to play in the governance of the country. The power belongs to the people. Whoever becomes president, in fact, when you look at our constitution, the power of whoever takes over as president is derived from the people. And I think the people of Zimbabwe need to realize that they have the power to vote in somebody and to vote them out when they start doing bad things. And this is what will stop the army from, stepping in. Because once a person continues to do bad things, it means that the country will then, go on a bad road of economic malperformance, and then there will be instability in the country. And then you then realize that that's when the army is likely to want to step in. But if the people themselves realize that they've got the power to vote someone in and to vote them out, then it means that we're unlikely to have the army having anything to do with the political governance of the country.
All right, thank you very much. Lloyd Covea from Amnesty International. I guess saying that justice should be done. It's unlikely there will be any major retribution for President Robert Mugabe, and one of his henchmen now coming in, but saying still there could be hope. Let's give Emmerson Mnangagwa a chance. All right, we're getting some international reaction, and the US Embassy in Harare has released a statement. Let's see what they are saying, and let's just say that President Trump has not tweeted about this issue at all, nothing to show you, but this is what the embassy is saying. Tonight marks an historic moment for Zimbabwe. We congratulate all Zimbabweans who raised their voices and stated peacefully and clearly that the time for change was overdue. As Secretary Tillerson recently stated, Zimbabwe has a historic opportunity to set itself on a new path. Through this process, the US urged unwavering support for the rule of law and for democratic practices. Whatever short-term arrangements the government may establish, the path forward must lead to free, fair and inclusive elections in which the people of Zimbabwe are free to assemble peacefully without undue interference and to voice their opinions without fear. Choose their own leaders. That's what they could fit in. And again, not endorsing a coup, not endorsing military action like Britain. They are emphasizing the possibility now of free and fair elections and emphasizing again that the people played a role in this. So focusing on the democratic side rather than the military coup side, because that's what it was when the military stepped in and took away the rights of the president to rule the country. Britain also reacting to Mugabe's resignation. This was the earlier statement from Theresa May, the British Prime Minister. The resignation of Robert Mugabe provides Zimbabwe with an opportunity to forge a new path free of the oppression that characterized his rule. And again, not talking about the coup at all, but talking about the problems with the country's economy, and just saying, as Britain's oldest, as Zimbabwe's oldest friend, we will do all we can to support this, working with our international and regional partners to help the country achieve the better future that it deserves. All right, so we've been bringing you live visuals from Pretoria protests tonight outside the embassy there. Protests, wrong word, celebrations. Euphoria on the streets also of Hillbrow here near Johannesburg. Let's go to Harare now, where our foreign editor Sophie Mokoena is standing by. Sophie, let's see if you can get a word in with the people around you and tell us what's the latest on the ground, if you can hear me.
Yeah? Just a minute, just a minute.
All right, Sophie's not ready, but we can listen in a little bit. We do have our resident translator on hand, Peter Ndora, and let's see what Zimbabweans themselves are saying. Now, remember that this jubilation broke out just minutes after it was announced in Parliament. The Speaker had received the resignation letter from President Robert Mugabe. People poured onto the streets. This is hours later. We've seen young and old on the streets. Let's just dip in and gauge the mood right now on the streets of Harare. And Sophie Mokoena, I believe you're back on the line. If you can hear me, tell us what you are seeing and hearing on the ground.
And also for our children.
Yes, we rushed to Borrowdale Road because we heard that there were protesters outside. But when we got there was nobody. The soldiers turned us back, telling us that the motorcade was about to leave. But we waited for the motorcade and nothing happened. We ended up passing State House and realized that only one minister had gone to this apparent cabinet meeting. And then we realized that maybe the story was developing from there.
And then we went to Parliament, we saw people, we spoke to parliamentarians. They were quite clear that this is the day.
Yes, very much so, and people came out in hundreds and it became thousands in the afternoon outside Parliament building in the African Unity Square, and that's where the story developed. Parliamentarians actually leaving the building, going to the HICC where they were holding the debates for the impeachment when the announcement happened.
At that time we were in the car and I said to you, Norma, what? And we dashed.
Yes, we had to dash from the car, run back to Unity Square to get the reaction of the people. It was a historic moment. It was amazing to see the people come together, especially because during the day it had been two factions, MDC supporters as well as ZANU-PF, coming together in this unified moment to say that it's a new day for them and a new era.
Well, let's talk to the people who have gathered here, because behind us, the office here, this is the office of President Robert Mugabe, or should I say the former president. No, let's talk to the people themselves. How do you feel today?
I'm so happy today. I can't believe we are here right now. I'm so happy. Viva Zimbabwe! Viva Zimbabwe!
This was the mood earlier on, and now, late, people are still celebrating.
Yes, it seems as if the celebrations will go well into the night. We are out here, like you said, we're out here outside President Mugabe's office and celebrations happening. We're even seeing the soldiers celebrating on their tanks tonight.
And what's the next move? We went to the press conference last night, the military, indicating that Mnangagwa will soon come to this country. Do you think this is going to happen very soon?
Yes, very much so. We expect President Mnangagwa, who was named as the successor to Mugabe, to be instated in the next 2 days. Maybe tomorrow or even Thursday we could see a new president of Zimbabwe.
Well, give me a chance. It was a story. We thought it's not going to happen in few days, but it will take months because of the legal processes. Now, in terms of the law of this country and the constitution, it's a shorter battle.
Yes, I understand that in terms of the constitution, Zimbabwe has 90 days to institute elections because of the resignation of Mugabe. So we should be having an announcement on when exactly Zimbabweans will go to the polls to choose their new president.
That was Noma Bulani. We came here on Saturday. We started working after the march. On Sunday, the Central Committee taking that decision. Yesterday, the caucus meeting. And today, Parliament passing a motion of no confidence. But in Parliament, the message that President Robert Mugabe has resigned. Now we are waiting to hear what's going to happen next. Over to you in Johannesburg.
Basically all night, also on the streets of Hillbrow, close to Johannesburg, on the streets of Pretoria, where Zimbabweans have just come out to celebrate the unexpected. Well, something was going to happen, an impeachment.
Look, it's been a dramatic week, I mean, to say the least. Some of the images that we've been seeing, and you know, once we saw Chiwenga on TV saying the things that he said, then the next day we had the Youth League sort of defending as much as they could Robert Mugabe. And then the army came back. I think that at that moment, the game changed significantly. And as I guess we're saying earlier on, when Mnangagwa left and sent that message that I will be back to rule this country, fear not my people, he said it was a pregnant statement, and it has come to pass. So a reformatting of ZANU-PF, Is ZANU-PF reforming itself? Only time will tell. But right now, what most people are concerned about, what most people are excited about, is that they have come to an end of an era. And Robert Mugabe was the face of ZANU-PF. Whether he was just a cog in the wheel, whether he was just the face of the party, either way, people associated their struggles and their difficulties with the face of this man, which was Robert Mugabe.
For me, a big question is, how does somebody stay in power for decades and then the fall comes so quickly? Was it because he challenged the military that was propping up his rule for so long, or perhaps determined to have his wife succeed him, who was unpalatable to a whole lot of these structures?
Yeah, look, I mean, there are so many things that contributed, and it didn't start now. It started perhaps as far back as Gukrahundi in the 1980s. How he dealt with with ZAPU and some of the ZAPU leadership that were jailed. So from as far back as then, there was always a kind of a revolution that was taking place. And there were always voices and heroes. We've got modern heroes, but we have heroes over time that have been pushing back and being jailed. We had journalists over time. I'm thinking of Mark Chavunduka even now, who died as a result of injuries that they sustained at the hands of this regime. So whilst today we might be looking at this and saying that this is as a result of this past week, I think, to be fair, this has been a result of pressure over time, and he's been applying more and more force as time passed, and as a result it had to blow. The gasket had to blow at some point. And this week, turning on the military was the final nail in the coffin. Emmerson Mnangagwa was the final nail in the coffin. But it wasn't the only contribution. You can go back to 1983, I would suggest.
And so many implications for SADC. We'll continue with the analysis, no doubt, throughout the week. Our own president, Jacob Zuma, was on his way to Zimbabwe. SADC Troika meetings had already taken place. What does this mean for the region? We had to kick out all the local news tonight, and hopefully you enjoyed our special broadcast focusing on this incredible outpouring in Zimbabwe. We'll continue to follow events there for you, but from us, this is a wrap.
There's quite a lot still to come.
Yeah, but from us, good night for now.